Translation. This time, Lord Chaitanya stayed at the house of Chandrasekhara, although he was regarded as a Shudra or Kayasta, for the Lord, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is completely independent. Purport. Lord Chaitanya stayed at the house of Chandrasekhara, a clerk, although a sannyasi is not supposed to reside in a Shudra's house. 500 years ago, especially in Bengal, it was the system that persons who were born in the families of Brahmanas were accepted as Brahmanas, and all those who took birth in other families, even the higher caste, namely the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, were considered Shudra non-Brahmanas. Therefore, although Sri Chandrasekhar was a clerk from a Kayasta family in Upper India, he was considered a Shudra. Similarly, Vaishyas, especially those of the Suvarnavanik community, were accepted as Shudras in Bengal. And even the Vaidyas, who were generally physicians, were also considered Shudras. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, however, did not accept this artificial principle, which was introduced in society by self-interested men, and later the Kayastas, Vaidyas, and Vaniks all began to accept the sacred thread despite objections from the so-called Brahmanas. Prabhupada's very careful in the way he words things. You notice he doesn't even admit that they're Brahmins. He doesn't accept them as Brahmins who had adopted this policy. He says the so-called Brahmanas. Before the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Suvarnavanik class was condemned by Bilal Sen, who was then the king of Bengal, due to a personal grudge. In Bengal, the Suvarnavanik class are always very rich, for they are bankers and dealers in gold and silver. Therefore, Bilal Sen used to borrow money from a Suvarnavanik banker. Bilal Sen's bankruptcy later obliged the Suvarnavanik banker to stop advancing money to him, and thus he became angry and condemned the entire Suvarnavanik society as belonging to the Shudra community. Doesn't sound like he was a very qualified king. Bilal Sen tried to introduce the Brahmanas not to accept the Suvarnavaniks as followers of the instructions of the Vedas under the Brahminical directions. But although some Brahmanas approved of Bilal Sen's actions, others did not. Thus, the Brahmanas also became divided amongst themselves, and those who supported the Suvarnavanik class were rejected from the Brahmin community. At the present day, the same biases are still being followed. There are many Vaishnava families in Bengal whose members, although not actually born Brahmanas, act as acharyas by initiating disciples and offering the sacred thread as enjoined in the Vaishnava Tantras. For example, in the families of Thakur Raghunanda, Acharya Thakur Krishnadas, Navani Hoda, and Rasikananda Dev, a disciple of Shamananda Prabhu, the sacred thread ceremony is performed as it is for the caste Goswamis, and this system has continued for the past 300 to 400 years. Accepting the disciples born in Brahmana families, they are bona fide spiritual masters who have the facility to worship the Shalagram Shila, which is worshipped with the deity. As of this writing, Shalagram Shila worship has not yet been introduced in our Krishna consciousness movement, but soon it will be introduced in all our temples as an essential function of Archana Marg, deity worship. So, when I first read this purport in preparation for the class, I was thinking, this is a really kind of like almost social history of Bengal, which I know only a little bit about, not much. But there are some very pertinent points to be considered. The main point is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't at all accept these social considerations. In his spreading of the Krishna consciousness movement, he made no such distinctions. And evidence in this verse even is that he stayed at the house of Chandrasekhar. Now, ordinarily in the Bengal, the society of that time, a sannyasi would never stay in the home of a Shudra, that it would be considered improper. But Lord Chaitanya knew that Chandrasekhar was a great devotee of the Lord, so for him this was absolutely no consideration at all. This was one of the principles underpinning the whole movement of Chaitanya. It was a revolutionary movement, even at the time, very revolutionary, that these social considerations were not taken as any kind of a guideline for behavior. I mean, sometimes they observed it just as not to create a disturbance. But generally speaking, in terms of preaching, making devotees, and association, none of these social etiquettes were paid much attention to by Lord Chaitanya. Sarvapadi vinirmuktang tatparatrena nirmalam. That all these designations based on the bodily concept of life were rejected. And the movement was spread on the basis of the platform of the soul, not on the basis of any bodily or social considerations. So, since I know that it's the Christmas Marathon is on, and I was thinking about how difficult it is. Just the other day, I won't embarrass anybody because I'm not going to mention any names, but I spotted a devotee out in Sankirtan in a town nearby where I live, by themselves, in a feminine earth suit. This is sometimes, a friend of mine refers to the body as the earth suit. So, this devotee had a feminine earth suit, and she was all by herself trying to distribute books in this mall of people madly trying to, find those last minute, or not really last minute, but those gifts for Christmas. And I was admiring the determination and the courage of this person, thinking, that's actually quite bold and brave to go out. And I was thinking, well, what was the formula? Prabhupada said there was actually a preaching formula. And that formula was enunciated by, this is a little bit of an aside before I get to the main part of the class, but I just thought it would be kind of nice to hear these things. There's a formula by Prabodhananda Saraswati about how you preach and what the mood of a preacher should be. So, I'm going to read some of that. The verse is, Dhante nidhaya tinakang padayor nipatya kaku shatam kritva cha etad ahang bravimi he sadava sakalang eva vihaya dhurat Chaitanya Chandra charane kurutanuraga. He says, and this is Prabhupada speaking here, giving a kind of a summary of the verse. He says, this is the process of preaching. My dear sir, I am falling down on your lotus feet, and with folded hands I'm flattering you 1,000 times, and I have taken one grass in my mouth to show my humbleness. So you kindly hear my one word. What is that? Hey Sadhava, you are a very great sadhu, and you have learned so many things. Hey Sadhava, sakalam eva vihaya dhurat. This is my request, that whatever you have learned, so many things, kindly forget, kick them out. Then what shall I take? Chaitanya Chandra Charane Kurutan Uraga. Just become a servant on the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is my request. So, we have to preach like that. Just flatter him, but request him that you forget all these bogus things. Of course, not that you actually say, forget all these bogus things that you've learned, but you say, you're very learned, you're very wonderful, you're a great saintly, you're obviously a saintly person, but I have one request, that you kindly hear about Lord Chaitanya's glories. So he says, simply take to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Your life will be successful. As it is. We have already Tanhara Charana Shrita Se Bhadadhanya. He's glorified because he receives. To become under the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Anyone who takes shelter at the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he becomes glorified. Say Bhadadhanya. So this was spoken in Mayapur in 1974 on a walk. Here's another one. All these are on the same theme, but slightly different each time. It's kind of... Prabhupada, we know that he is a fool. He's talking about people that we approach. We know that he is a fool, but we have to present in a different way. We shall say that there is nobody as learned as you are. In this way, just make him puffed up. And then you say humbly, my only humble request is that whatever you have learned, please forget. Now you try to understand Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that's all. This is the different way of calling him that whatever you have learned, this is all rubbish. We simply say, kindly forget them. Now you turn your attention to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is the way Prabodhananda Saraswati taught us. You flatter him. Sir, I've got one request. Flatter him like anything, falling down on his leg and becoming humble, and say, Sir, I have got one request. What is that? You are a very learned scholar, but kindly forget them, and you try to turn your attention to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He will not be angry. Then, if he turns his attention to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then naturally he will forget all rubbish things. Then from another, this was in Atlanta, then another time, wherever you go, you gather people and induce them by flattering them, by falling on their leg. It's an interesting expression. He says, falling on their leg. I'm not quite sure exactly what that means, but I assume it just means bowing down. Falling on their leg. I mean, that would definitely stop them short. Falling on their leg. Some way or other induce them. Dante nidhaya tinakang padayor nipatya. This is the process shown by Prabodhananda Saraswati. Taking a straw in my mouth and falling down on your lotus feet. Kakus shatam kritva. And I am trying to please you by so many flattering words. Kritva ahang bravimi. I have got some submission. This is the process. So now, when he will say, all right, you can say what you want to say. So in other words, you've approached him, you've flattered him, you've humbled yourself. Then he finally says, okay, say whatever you've got to say. He says, then hey Sadhava, you are a great personality, nobleman, sadhu. He may be a loafer class. So when the Prabhupada said this, the devotees were laughing because he's saying you're telling him he's a great noble person, but he said he may be loafer class. Doesn't matter who he is externally. Not by external appearances. He said, but give him all honor. You are so great and so exalted. Hey Sadhava, and so honest. I mean, if you tell a person they're honest, I mean, automatically they feel they've got to live up to that. My only submission is that whatever you have learned, you forget. Whatever nonsense you have learned, don't say nonsense. But we must know that he is a pucka rascal. Nonsense. So don't say directly nonsense. Say, you are the great personality. So kindly, whatever you have learned, forget. Then, what should I do? Hey sadhava sakalam eve vihaya dhurat. Kick out whatever nonsense you learned. Then what should I do? Now, Chaitanya Chandra Charane Kurat Nuragam. Kindly be submissive to Lord Chaitanya and chant Hare Krishna. This is our program. No argument. Because he is rascal, what is the use of arguing with him? He's a rascal number one. You know that. You cannot expect any good argument from the rascals and fools. Where is the logic? Their logic is to beat them with shoes. That is the only logic. But that if you do that, then you'll not be able to preach. Therefore, especially in this age, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Trinadapi sunichena, Thororav eva sahishnina, amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. So we should preach like this. Any rascal, because anyone who has no information of Krishna, he's a rascal. That's all. That we must know. But if you say that, you are a rascal, then you cannot preach. If you directly call a rascal, he'll be angry. In this way, preaching is practical, otherwise it is not possible. Everyone is thinking he is the most exalted personality, scientist, philosopher, and a great man. That is the material disease. You are dealing with all rascals, so if we call them directly rascal, they will be angry. Your preaching will not be successful. So follow the principles enunciated by Prabodhananda Saraswati and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There was one other incident where Prabhupada was on a morning walk, and he was stating this formula: I take a straw in my teeth and bow before you and ask you to hear about Lord Chaitanya. And one of Prabhupada's sannyasi disciples said, that's a very humble statement. And Prabhupada replied, a humble statement for giving you a slap in the face. So the point is, in order to give someone sometimes relevant instructions, you have to approach them humbly. Because sadhu, one of the meanings of sadhu is one who cuts illusion. Not the heart, but illusion. So sometimes cutting illusion can be a painful process for the recipient. So you have to try to accommodate. Because everybody is very much identified with their designations. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatparatrena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchate. That people are identified themselves with a particular caste or religion or bodily constitution, men, women, or maybe they've earned some big degree, or they have some position in society, and they very much identify with that, and they think, oh, you should show more respect. Don't you realize who I am? I am Dr. So-and-so. Or I have my PhD in this or that. So you should be bowing down. Just to be near me is a great honor for you. So there are a lot of people who think like that. They're so much identified with their bodily designations or their social designations that if people don't show them proper respect, they won't listen to anything you have to say. So Prabhupada is saying that therefore you have to approach everybody with some humility. They may be, as he says, rascals and fools, but they think they're something very exalted. So in a sense, you have to accept that this is the mentality, and you have to somehow overcome it. Understanding who they actually are. So, in this purport that we're studying today, this particular about the Kayastha class, especially, and the treatment of the Kayasthas by the Brahmanas. Actually, many of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers, Chandrasekhar was just one. He was born in what is considered to be a Shudra background. Haridas Thakur, born in a Muslim family. Ramananda Roy, who was actually the governor of Bengal, came from the Kayastha community, and many people considered him to be a Shudra, even though he was the governor. And these were some of Chaitanya's most intimate associates and disciples. Govinda, who had been the servant of Ishwara Puri, the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya, was from the Shudra community. And he always, then when Ishwara Puri was passing away, he ordered him to go and serve Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya was very reluctant to accept him. Not because he was from the Shudra class, but because he had been the associate of Ishwara Puri. So that was his consideration. But Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya instructed Lord Chaitanya, no, because it's the order of his spiritual master, the order of your spiritual master, that he should serve you. You have to accept. So Lord Chaitanya accepted him. Haridas Thakur used to spend a lot of time with Govinda because they had afforded them the opportunity to render all kinds of service to Lord Chaitanya and his followers. And that was what they wanted more than anything else. They always got the remnants of Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya used to personally deliver the remnants collected by Govinda, and he used to go every day to see Haridas Thakur and Jagannath Puri to give him those remnants. Although Haridas Thakur, by social distinction, couldn't enter the Jagannath temple. But Lord Chaitanya said, you simply meditate on this chakra and I'll come to see you. So Lord Jagannath came personally every day to see Haridas Thakur, such a great exalted person. But by birth, he had no standing whatsoever. Junior Haridas, very similar position. Raghunath Das, the great Goswami, he also came from a Kayastha family. Rupa and Sanatana Goswami were rejected by the Brahminical community because of their association with Mohammedans. So Lord Chaitanya's whole movement practically was made up by many of the persons anyway, not all, but many of his associates were persons who had been rejected by the so-called Brahminical order, Brahminical society. And they were some of the greatest personalities. So, in another portion of the Madhya Lila, there's an interesting description of when Lord Chaitanya met with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. At first, he had a very kind of casual or joking attitude about Vaishnavas. But after being converted by Lord Chaitanya, he became very dedicated to Lord Chaitanya. And when Lord Chaitanya asked him to explain spirituality, especially about Krishna, because he was a very learned person, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and he says, well, I don't know much. He said, but this Ramananda Roy, if you want to speak to someone that knows about Krishna Tattva, you go to see Ramananda Roy. So Lord Chaitanya took it on board. And he says to Sarvabhauma states, please do not neglect him, thinking he belongs to a Shudra family, engaged in material activity. It is my request that you meet him without fail. So Lord Chaitanya, he said, Ramananda Roy is a fit person to associate with you. No other devotee can compare with him in knowledge of the transcendental mellows. He is a most learned scholar, as well as an expert in devotional mellows. Actually, he is most exalted, and if you talk with him, you will see how glorious he is. I could not realize when I first spoke with Ramananda Roy that his topics and endeavors were all transcendently uncommon. I made fun of him simply because he was a Vaishnava. And Prabhupada writes an interesting purport to this verse. He says, anyone who is not a Vaishnava or an unalloyed devotee of the Supreme Lord must be a materialist. A Vaishnava living according to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's injunctions is certainly not on the materialistic platform. Chaitanya means spiritual force. All of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's activities were carried out on the platform of spiritual understanding. Therefore, only those who are on the spiritual platform are able to understand the activities of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Materialistic persons cannot understand these activities and are generally known as karmis or jnanis. The jnanis are mental speculators who simply try to understand what is spirit and what is matter. Their process is neti. This is not spirit. This is not Brahman. The jnanis are a little more advanced than the dull-headed karmis, who are simply interested in sense gratification. Before becoming a Vaishnava, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a mental speculator, jnani, and being such, he always cut jokes with Vaishnavas. A Vaishnava never agrees with the speculative system of the jnanis. Both the jnanis and karmis depend on direct sense perception for their imperfect knowledge. The karmis never agree to accept anything not directly perceived. And the jnanis put forth only hypotheses. However, the Vaishnavas, the unalloyed devotees of the Lord, do not follow the process of acquiring knowledge by direct sense perception or mental speculation, because they are servants of the Supreme Lord. Devotees receive knowledge directly from the Supreme Personality of God as he speaks it in the Bhagavad Gita, or sometimes as he imparts it from within as the Chaitya Guru. So, the purport goes on at some length. But going on with this, there's another interesting thing. Just before Lord Chaitanya left to go and go on further with his travels, Lord Chaitanya turned to the Bhattacharya and he asked him to bless him, which is also an interesting and significant incident. He said, "Please bless me while I engage in the devotional service of Lord Krishna." While Sarvabhauma engaged in the devotional service of Lord Krishna at home, so that by Sarvabhauma's mercy the Lord could return to Jagannath Puri. So he asked him for blessings. Now, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a householder, but Lord Chaitanya, as a sannyasi, was asking for blessings. So I was quite enlivened when I read no, not really. But the idea is that he didn't make some distinction like, oh, he's simply a grihastha, why should I bother with him? No, he was thinking, this person is a Vaishnava. He's beyond all these distinctions. So this is a kind of an interesting point. It says here in the purport, a sannyasi is supposed to offer blessings to a grihastha, yet now by his practical behavior, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requested the blessings of a grihastha. This incident shows the special significance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's preaching. He gave equal status to everyone, regardless of material considerations. His movement is thoroughly spiritual. Although apparently a grihastha, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was unlike the so-called karmis interested in sense gratification. After being initiated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and there's another point, he was initiated by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was his spiritual master, and the spiritual master is asking his disciple for blessings. So just imagine the implications. So he says, he was always engaged in the service of the Lord, even at home. In our disciplic line, we have the example of a perfect householder, Paramahansa, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. In his book, Sharanagati, Bhaktivinoda Thakur states, Ye dina grihe bhajana deki grihete goloko bhai. Whenever a householder glorifies the Supreme Lord in his home, his activities are immediately transformed into the activities of Goloka Vrindavan, spiritual activities taking place in the Goloka Vrindavan planet of Krishna. Activities exhibited by Krishna himself at Bhama Vrindavan, the Vrindavan Dham existing on this planet, are not different from his activities on the planet Goloka Vrindavan. This is proper realization of Vrindavan anywhere. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we inaugurated the new Vrindavan activities wherein devotees are always engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And this is not different from Goloka Vrindavan. The conclusion is that one who acts strictly in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is competent to offer blessings to sannyasis, even though he be a grihastha householder. Although he is in an exalted position, a sannyasi still must elevate himself to the transcendental platform by rendering service to the Lord. By his actual behavior, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu begged the blessings of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and in this way he set the example of how one should expect blessings from a Vaishnava, regardless of his social position. So this is such an essential point in our philosophy and also in our social interaction, that a person's significance, you could say, or importance, of course everyone should be respected, but a person's spiritual significance has to do with how much he knows the science of Krishna. When Lord Chaitanya finally approached Ramananda Roy, Ramananda Roy began glorifying Lord Chaitanya. You're such a great personality, you're a sannyasi, you're this and that. He was glorifying him. And Lord Chaitanya wasn't very happy with it. He said, after hearing about your glories, saying to Ramananda Roy, after hearing about your glories, I have come to your place, but you're offering me words of praise out of respect for a sannyasi, one in the renounced order of life. He didn't think much of it. I've come to hear from you. I know that you're an exalted Vaishnava. Don't try to bewilder me by all this praise. So these things, sometimes devotees try to imitate these dealings of exalted persons, and sometimes it can become a little artificial. Oh, Prabhu, you're so great, you're this, you're that, the other. And then the other devotee's trying to top the other devotee by saying, oh no, actually I'm lower than this or that. And it always reminds me of something, of course I've said it many times, but that one time a devotee was trying to be really humble, and he came to approach Prabhupada and said, oh Prabhupada, he said, I'm the most fallen. And Prabhupada said, no, you're not the most anything. So we sometimes, in trying to imitate the behavior of exalted persons, we sometimes fall into a kind of cheapen the actual exchange, which is completely coming from the heart. It's not a social dance of etiquette. It should be heartfelt. These expressions should always come, very sincerely from the heart. Otherwise, they're not worth much. If you're going to praise somebody, do it meaningfully and heartfelt, in a heartfelt way, not artificially. So, nice purport. Prabhupada says, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains that a mundane person being enriched by mundane opulences must always know that the transcendental opulences of the advanced devotees are far more important than the materialistic opulences of a person like himself. A materialistic person with material opulences should not be very proud or puffed up before a transcendental devotee. If one approaches a transcendental devotee on the strength of one's material heritage, opulence, education, and beauty, in other words, like what we were talking about earlier, I come from this family, and I have a PhD in molecular biology, and what's more, my family, there are very many exalted persons in my family, and I have a lot of money, and I have a very gorgeous home, etc., etc., etc. So if one approaches a devotee, a transcendental devotee, in that mood, he's not going to get much benefit. Prabhupada's saying one should not be very proud or puffed up before a transcendental devotee. If one approaches him on the strength of these material opulences, he says, and does not offer respect to the advanced devotee of the Lord, the Vaishnava devotee may offer formal respects to such a materially puffed up person, but he may not deliver transcendental knowledge to him. So, this is an important point. When you're approaching someone who's spiritually advanced, they don't care for your... there's a famous person who used to be a sannyasi in our movement, Guru Kripa Swami, and he had a very unique style of delivery. But one of the things I remember he said to somebody once, he said, nobody cares for your profile, he said. So, he had sort of a gangster style of preaching, but it was very effective. Very effective. It was very cutting. Nobody cares for your profile. So, all these so-called opulences that people acquire, and they think, somehow that gives them a special distinction. Prabhupada used to say, quoting the old English proverb, every pauper is proud of his penny. So these are like pennies, these things. He says, indeed, the devotee sees him as a non-Brahmana or Shudra. Such a puffed-up person cannot understand the science of Krishna. A proud person is deceived in transcendental life, and despite having attained a human form, will again glide into hellish conditions. By his personal example, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains how one should be submissive and humble before a Vaishnava. So here's approaching Ramananda Roy, who many people in the Brahmin community were disparaging. Oh, well, he may be the governor, but... his family background, really. So, this attitude, by his personal example, Lord Chaitanya showed that even though one may be situated on a high platform, still, he was teaching as the Acharya how to be a spiritual master and how to be a disciple also. Both. So then, right after having said this to Ramananda Roy, he followed it up with one of the verses that you'll hear again and again and again in classes, in lectures, in Prabhupada's books. You'll come across it again and again. Kiba vipra kiba nyasi shudra kani noi ye Krishna tattva veda se guru ai. That whether one is a Brahmin, a sannyasi, or a Shudra, regardless of what he is, he can become a spiritual master if he knows the science of Krishna. So he's basically telling him, Ramananda Roy, I don't care what your position is in society, I know that you know the science of Krishna, and that's what I've come for. And this is true, that if one actually knows the science of Krishna, then he's qualified. And this is such an important verse. Of course, Lord Chaitanya also, there another famous verse about, I'm not a sannyasi, I'm not so many things. I'm simply the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. So that mood, that's the mood of a Vaishnava, that he sees others as the servants of Krishna, and he sees one who knows the science of Krishna as his master. And he approaches them with humility. So Prabhupada writes, and I'm going to read this purport because it's an important purport. This verse is very important to the Krishna consciousness movement. In his Amrita Pravaha Bhasya, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that one should not think that because Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born a Brahmana and was situated in the topmost spiritual order as a sannyasi, it was improper for him to receive instructions from Srila Ramananda Roy, who belonged to the Shudra caste. To clarify this matter, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu informed Ramananda Roy that knowledge of Krishna consciousness is more important than caste. In the system of Varnashram Dharma, there are various duties for the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. Actually, the Brahmana is supposed to be the spiritual master of all the other Varnas, or classes. But as far as Krishna consciousness is concerned, everyone is capable of becoming a spiritual master because knowledge in Krishna consciousness is on the platform of the spirit soul. To spread Krishna consciousness, one need only be cognizant of the science of the spirit soul. It does not matter whether one is a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, Sannyasi, Grihastha, or whatever. If one simply understands his science, he can become a spiritual master. It is stated in the Hari Bhakti Vilasa that one should not accept initiation from a person who is not in the Brahminical order if there is a fit person in the Brahminical order present. This instruction is meant for those who are overly dependent on the mundane social order. So, in other words, it's not really for people who truly understand things. If one understands the truth of Krishna consciousness and seriously desires to attain transcendental knowledge for the perfection of life, he can accept a spiritual master from any social status, provided the spiritual master is fully conversant with the science of Krishna. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur also states that although one is situated as a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, Brahmachari, Vanaprastha, Grihastha, or Sannyasi, if he is conversant in the science of Krishna, he can become a spiritual master as Vartma Pradarshaka Guru, Diksha Guru, or Shiksha Guru. The spiritual master who first gives information about spiritual life is called the Vartma Pradarshaka Guru. The spiritual master who initiates according to the regulations of the Shastras is called the Diksha Guru, and the spiritual master who gives instructions for elevation is called the Shiksha Guru. Factually, the qualification of a spiritual master depends on his knowledge of the science of Krishna. So that's the essence right there. The qualification of a spiritual master depends on his knowledge of the science of Krishna. Sometimes you see in our movement, sometimes let's put it this way, neophyte devotees, sometimes they automatically offer all respects to the deities and to sannyasis, and then everybody else is kind of a merge. But here it doesn't support this. It says that someone is qualified if they know the science of Krishna. It doesn't matter what their social position is. This instruction is given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and is not at all against the injunctions of the Shastras. In the Padma Purana it is said, Na Shudra Bhagavat Bhaktaste Pi Bhagavatutama Sarva Varneshu Te Shudra Yena Bhakta Janardane. One who is actually advanced in spiritual knowledge of Krishna is never a Shudra, even though he may be born in a Shudra family. However, even if a Vipra or Brahmana is very expert in the 6 Brahminical activities, patana patana, yajana yajana, dhana pratigraha, and is also well versed in the Vedic hymns, he cannot become a spiritual master unless he is a Vaishnava. But if one is born in the family of Chandalas, yet is well versed in Krishna consciousness, he can become a guru. These are the Shastric injunctions. And strictly following these injunctions, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as a Grihastha named Sri Vishvambar, was initiated by a sannyas guru named Ishwarapuri. Similarly, Sri Nityananda Prabhu was initiated by Madhavendra Puri, a sannyasi. According to others, however, he was initiated by Lakshmipati Tirtha. Advaita Acharya, although a Grihastha, was initiated by Madhavendra Puri, and Sri Rasikananda, although born in a Brahmin family, was initiated by Sri Shamananda Prabhu, who was not born in a caste Brahmana family. There are many instances in which a born Brahmin took initiation from a person who was not born in a Brahmin family. The Brahminical symptoms are explained in Srimad Bhagavatam 7:11-35, wherein it is stated, Yasya lakshanam proktam pungso varnaviv yanjakam yad anya trapi drishyeta tat tenaiva vinirdishet. If a person is born in a Shudra family, but has all the qualities of a spiritual master, he should be accepted not only as a Brahmin, but as a qualified spiritual master also. This is also the instruction of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur therefore introduced the sacred thread ceremony for all Vaishnavas according to the rules and regulations. Now this caused a tremendous, during the time of the preaching of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, this philosophy that anyone could become a guru, anyone could become a Vaishnava, and should be considered equal to or even more superior to a Brahmin, and could give initiation despite his social or background according to birth and so many other considerations. And this caused a big uproar. In fact, in one procession, Parikram procession, Bhaktisiddhanta and his disciples were stoned for their advocating this idea. It met with tremendous hostility from the caste Goswamis and the Brahmin community. So this is not something that has been extinguished, this idea, which is very much based on the bodily platform. So, Prabhupada goes on to write, sometimes a Vaishnava who is a Bhajananandi does not take the Savitra Sanskar, sacred thread initiation. But this does not mean that this system should be used for preaching work. There are two kinds of Vaishnavas, Bhajananandi and Goshtananandi. A Bhajananandi is not interested in preaching work, but a Goshtananandi is interested in spreading Krishna consciousness to benefit the people and increase the number of Vaishnavas. A Vaishnava is understood to be above the position of a Brahmana. As a preacher, he should be recognized as a Brahmana, otherwise there may be a misunderstanding of his position as a Vaishnava. However, a Vaishnava Brahmin is not selected on the basis of his birth, but according to his qualities. So this is even stated in Bhagavad Gita, Guna Karma Vibhagasha. But according to quality and according to activity, one is accepted. It never says anything about Janma or birth. According to his qualities. Unfortunately, those who are unintelligent do not know the difference between a Brahmana and a Vaishnava. They are under the impression that unless one is a Brahmana, he cannot be a spiritual master. For this reason only, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu makes the statement in this verse, Kiba Vipra, Kiba Nyasi, Shudra Keninoy, Ye Krishna Tattva Veda Se Guru Hai. If one becomes a guru, he is automatically a Brahmin. Sometimes the caste guru says that Ye Krishna Tattva Veda Se Guru Hai means that one who is not a Brahmana may become a Shiksha guru or Vartma Pradarshaka guru, but not an initiator guru. So this is one of their arguments. You can become a guru, yes, you can become a guru, but not Diksha guru. Of course, this is nothing in the Shastra about that, but that's their claim. According to such caste gurus, birth and family ties are considered foremost. However, the hereditary consideration is not acceptable to Vaishnavas. The word guru is equally applicable to the Vartma Pradarshak guru, Shiksha guru, and Diksha guru. Unless we accept the principle enunciated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, This Krishna consciousness movement cannot spread all over the world. According to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's intentions, Prativiti Achayata Nagaradigram Sarvatra Prachara Haibe Moranam. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu his cult must be preached all over the world. This does not mean that people should take to his teachings and remain Shudras or Chandalas. So this is an important point of emphasis. It's not that one takes initiation but remains in an unpurified condition, but rather he follows the process strictly and then becomes qualified by his practice. As soon as one is trained as a pure Vaishnava, he must be accepted as a bona fide Brahmin. This is the essence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions in this verse. So, in this verse that we have on the board today, it's very nicely identifying this false mentality that according to one's birth, one has some type of qualification just by being born in a particular family. What's probably explained about this is that taking birth in a particular family means you have a good opportunity. Just as if you're born in a family of, say, I think he gives the example of a high court judge. It doesn't mean that just by being born in that family you become a high court judge. Everyone understands this. If that person receives the proper education and training and achieves the proper qualifications, then he's a high court judge, not otherwise. In fact, Prabhupada told a story once about there was a family and the father was a high court, very big position judge, and he had 3 sons, and 2 of them also became judges. And a third son became a Tungawala. He was driving a Tunga. So the question was, why was he driving a Tunga and the other 2 were Supreme Court judges? And the answer was that he'd fallen in love with a woman from a sweeper caste, and the only job he could find, since he had been rejected by his community, was to drive this Tunga. So the point is that he had the opportunity, but he didn't take it. So it's just like that. We may be born in any kind of family, but it doesn't grant any particular qualification unless one actually develops the qualifications. So therefore we accept association. We try to accept association with those who are actually following this process and who've actually achieved significant spiritual elevation. From those persons we can gain a great deal. And that should be the kind of association we seek. Those persons who are not only, as we say, who can talk the talk but also walk the walk. Those who follow the process and also speak very nicely. So that is where the potency develops. If one strictly follows this process and tries to educate others in the science of Krishna consciousness, then that person's association is to be sought out. So I'll stop there. It's getting late. Anybody have any questions?